Welcome back to another episode of Taking Inventory. Today, we're excited to be joined by Nick Bell, who's at Fanatics, leading up the content commerce side of the business. He's had a long storied career in all media, from traditional to modern to digital search media. Nick, we're super excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
I'm excited to be here. Some old faces, so nice to be back.
Yes, for anyone listening, we're old friends from Snap. You were leading up a number of teams there while we were trying to build up the ads business. And you provided a lot of great content and a lot of great inventory for us to stuff some ads into. So we thank you for that. But why don't we kick it off with kind of the beginning of your career at News Corp, which I don't know if it's accurate to classify that maybe as traditional media, but then move through kind of your career, leading things up at Snap, then Google, and now Fanatics.
Yeah, sure. So maybe step back even further. So I had a little untraditional kind of journey into my professional career. I actually left school when I just turned 16. I built a website called teenfront.com, which was a teenage website focused on content and community. So, forums, live chat, and had my friends write articles about sport, music, fashion, etc. We gathered quite a bit of pace and sold that business in 2000. And, after an early success like that, thought, I'm just going to be an entrepreneur. This is easy. Had one hit and just was I'm going to do the next hit, going to do the next hit, going to do the next hit. Turns out it's not always that easy. And, spent the next few years after that really trying to find what I wanted to do and find where my passion was. And, I think I quickly realized that there's a lot more than just trying to make something to sell it. You've got to be passionate about it, right? So I kind of chased ideas that I felt were going to be, a commercial success rather than stuff I was truly passionate about. And then in 2005, got heavily involved in online video. We built a startup called Quick TV, which was allowing you to take video. You basically would upload it and then add interactivity to it. So you could add a tag, so you could buy something, or we had voting functionality. We had, the ability to put chapters in the video, etc. And the whole premise was, online video was starting to take off. But, my view at the time was just taking clips and putting them on the internet didn't really feel like, the kind of the right way to think about online video. I was this should be a new medium, and this new medium, should feel native to the kind of platform. And, obviously having a mouse at the time and being able to actually interact felt like a really obvious opportunity. We launched at kind of similar time to YouTube. And I think, YouTube, obviously wild success story. But I think they had the same sort of concept, which was, it's not just clips on the internet. And out of that was really born short form video, right? Content that was made specifically for the web, 3 to 5 minutes in length. And that obviously became the sort of prevailing medium of the time. And adding interactivity was just creatively difficult and, really wasn't enough kind of upside. But we got a lot of interest, and some of the interest we got was from News Corp. So I got to know those folks fairly well. And then in 2010, went across to lead in the UK, initially lead video and social there. And then quite quickly kind of rose through the ranks and ended up running digital for The Sun, which was the UK's largest newspaper at the time, and News of the World, which was the big Sunday newspaper. That later closed down. It's part of the phone hacking incident at News Corp. But it was a wild time to be there. And I think what was kind of interesting during that period is News Corp was all of a sudden under a lot of pressure. It was being talked about across the globe due to what was happening in the UK with phone hacking. And I just kept building stuff, right? I was an entrepreneur and just kept building stuff and quite quickly, made a mark there. And it was a really interesting time for media in general. The iPhone launched in 2007, and that was having a pretty significant impact, iPad as well, just in terms of how people were consuming. And it felt like both a huge opportunity for traditional media, for newspapers, because all of a sudden, you could deliver quality journalism to people wherever they were, but also a huge threat. So it was like a fun time to be in that world. A couple of years later, 2013, moved across to New York to run the digital team globally, and quickly discovered that, my passion was for disrupting and doing something slightly different. One of my, highlights during my time at News Corp was actually sitting in the room as we would go to different countries to visit the newspapers with Rupert Murdoch, and seeing him sit down with the newspaper editors and take, he had a very kind of repeatable process where you'd sit down with the editor and literally go through the day's newspaper. And kind of like, I kind of talk about like almost like marking the homework, right? You would say, this front page is good, but why did you choose this picture? I would have chosen this picture. And there was just so many moments where I was just learning from one of the greats about what made great content. And a lot of that I just absorbed and took with me and still have with me today as we think about, how to tell stories and how to grab people's attention, how to keep them engaged. And I really credit Rupert. Very few people have the luxury of being sat in the room with, frankly, one of like the world's best newspaper editors who's getting schooled by, the ultimate storyteller in the world. And it was just such a fascinating experience. And I learned such a huge amount. And that led me to a meeting with Evan Spiegel. We went for dinner. I actually invited Evan to meet with Rupert one day, and we were talking. And at the time, Evan was kind of, talking through where Snap was up to and, how they were thinking about monetization, et cetera. And I pitched him on the idea of building, a newspaper-esque product inside Snapchat that they could sell advertising around. We over dinner, we were talking about this, and he turned his phone around and showed me a very early version of what they were thinking about. And I kind of went into Rupert Murdoch mode and started schooling him on what was right and wrong about it. And, we got into a great back and forth, and we were smiling. And, for those who've spent time with him, when he gets excited, he was like really engaged. And I didn't think much more of the meeting because I was pitching on News Corp building this. And he asked me to go to the Snap offices the next day to see them. And I said, okay, sure. And I turned up and asked to see Evan, and they told me Evan wasn't available. Asked what my name was, and it was in, an unmarked, highly guarded building, as was the time at Snap. And from there, I was led into a meeting room, and in walks Emily White, who was the COO at the time, with my LinkedIn resume printed, and she started interviewing me. And so I started answering the questions, and about 5 minutes in, I just looked at her and I said, "Is this a job interview?" And she said, "Yeah, it is. Why do you think you're here?" I was like, "I don't know, Evan. I had dinner with Evan last night. He asked me to swing by the office to see it and have lunch. And here I am getting interviewed." And she was laughing. And anyway, in kind of true Evan style, I guess, after meeting 3 or 4 other people that afternoon, he walks in and hands me an envelope with an offer. And that was kind of the start of my time at Snap, if you like. And, it was a kind of a wild time. Obviously joined Snap. Snap was still just a messaging app at the time. Stories hadn't even launched. So Stories launched when I was there. And, over the next year, we kind of started to chip away at, how do we build a content product that, really did a couple of things. One, used the iPhone, or use the, mobile devices to tell stories. 2, to help Snap reposition itself by partnering with some of the world's largest and most trusted media companies. If you ever had a chance to see the original Snap screen where we had 12 logos, we had, some of the world's largest media brands who just brought a huge amount of credibility to a product that at the time still was kind of, famous for what teenagers were using, it for. And everyone thought it was just for sending for nefarious purposes, put it that way. And the reality was obviously that was not the truth. But, if you were not a Snap user, you probably didn't understand that. And I think just the the elevation of the halo effect that these big media brands gave us was really beneficial to the business at the time. And then obviously, as you mentioned earlier on, created a great canvas for us to allow brands to tell their stories as well. So, obviously, I think was pretty important in the early stages of, selling advertising on Snapchat. And, it's been exciting to see how that product has grown and changed and morphed and continues to morph since then. So that was a fun time.
Yeah, I remember seeing that first Discover page with the logos, and it like gave me goosebumps. It was so like different, like what that experience represented, and it was just like, to your point, just the repositioning of Snap. And like, I think that was the moment, even like at least for me seeing it, it was like, this thing's like a Facebook killer. Like this is like truly going to become a place where people could spend like all their time. And I think even just like, you guys were so ahead of the curve on like brand safety, like all these things now that are so obvious, you guys just like nailed it. So it was just so cool to see. I guess, given like the success of Snap, how long were you there for? Like in Snap years, like 100.
Yeah. I joined at the start of 2014 and left. When did I leave? 2019. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so then I've listened to a couple of interviews you've done, but you talked a little bit about, you did investing for a little bit. Like, what was that experience like? Obviously it didn't stick now that you're CEO of Fanatics Live, but what was that?
Yeah.
Was that fun?
So like post Snap, Snap was such an interesting journey. And you joked about the kind of dog years there, as you guys know this well as well. It was like so much was crammed in to that short space of time. And, there was such an energy and such a commitment from the team in those early years that I felt like we just worked all day, every day. And, I remember, Imran Khan, who was chief strategy officer at the time, said to me one day, like, will you come down to Australia and pitch some folks with me? I said, sure. When are you going? And he's like, oh, next Tuesday. I was like, all right, okay. He's like, when are you coming back? He's like, Tuesday. And like, I was like, oh, Wednesday, like, but the time shift, like we were literally going down there for like 3 hours to go pitch these folks. I was like, crazy, but okay. And like, there was just so much crammed in, and it felt like, every waking hour, was spent thinking about, Snap and building Snap. And like this, I wouldn't swap that for the world. And I've made some like lifelong friends from doing that. Right. But it was such a rare experience and such a unique experience, but it was also super tiring. Right. And like, I felt after 5 years that I was just ready for a break, and went traveling for 4 months with my newly, my new wife. And then I got pretty bored and decided that I was going to get into the world of investing. And my problem with that is like, I think I quickly discovered that I was an operator, and every business I looked at, I fell in love with. I was like, I know I want to do this. I want to do this. And like, my partner at the time was like, no, like we're meant to look at hundreds of companies and choose one, right? And I was like, that wasn't quite suited to me. And I just, I realized again that like, even when we started to invest in these businesses, I just wanted to spend more time with them and get more heavily involved. And that's kind of, what kind of led me to think, okay, what's next? And I actually, Google reached out to me and pitched me on a few things, and I ended up going across to Google to lead the images team, which was a really interesting opportunity. I think if you look at where Google Images was within the organization, it was kind of an autonomous group for historic reasons that was kind of off to the side of search and kind of had its own kind of lane to play in. They talk about being like the third largest search engine, Google being number one, YouTube being number two, and Google Images being number three. And, it was a rounding error of, billions of dollars of revenue, but, rounding error in the greater scheme of Google. And therefore was like a platform and a canvas that you could actually go in and like do things with and change and, have a fair amount of autonomy compared to, the core search product. So for me, it was like really just following my dreams of when I was a teenager of like, if you'd asked me what, my dream job in the world was, I would say, like something in Silicon Valley, and it's probably working for like Google, Apple, or Facebook. So when the opportunity arose, it just felt like, you know, it was on my bucket list and something I had to do. And, you know, the first 6 months there were incredible leading the images team, and had a blast. And I think a lot of my thinking and, you know, a lot of the kind of input that I had on what what I thought search should be doing, you know, started to become part of the conversation. And then I ended up being asked to go and lead the Google core search experience team, which on the face of it was like an incredible role and like, you know, a massive step up from Google Images. And I was super excited. I think the reality is like, it's kind of like, I guess it gets to a world where it's a bit like politics, where it's like, what can you actually achieve in 4 years, right? There's so much inertia, there's so much pressure, there's so much responsibility. And, you know, there's 2 billion people a day using Google search. There's so many edge cases. It's so complicated that it's actually very, very hard to innovate and do things, you know, quickly and actually have meaningful progress. You know, I worked my ass off for the period that I was there, and still hard to kind of look back and actually pinpoint I did this. You know, it was like, it is, you know, it's a business that, you know, is highly, highly successful. But at the same time, you know, trying to change away from that is difficult. And I think, you know, they're going through an interesting period right now, obviously with the kind of external pressures and innovations that are going on. And I think, you know, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But when I was there, it was kind of interesting. You know, everyone was talking about, you know, the threat to search. But I think what became very clear was it was not going to be another search engine that, you know, really kind of started to erode at Google's market share. You know, even when Bing kind of led the charge with AI, et cetera, it never really felt to me that was a credible threat to market share. What was really the threat to market share is like how other people were consuming information, and the fact that, you know, rather than going to Google and searching for autumn fashion, you know, people would go to TikTok and start, you know, scrolling through and viewing autumn fashion. And my view and my line that I used to use regularly there is it easier for Google to become the most beloved and used product for young people, or is it easier for TikTok to really figure out search and discovery? And I always felt like, you know, that was the threat. And I think, you know, that's, you know, Google very much focused on that, I believe still. And, you know, they obviously have a very healthy balance sheet and some of the smartest people in the world. So I wouldn't bet against them, but that's, I think, going to be an interesting thing to watch over the next decade.
Yeah, that's crazy. Was it for you, just given everything you've done, was it still pretty surreal that you were leading search? Were you just like, what is like happening here?
For me, I didn't really think about it like that. I just felt like it was a pleasure and an honor to work with such a, you know, a group of smart people. You know, at the time, you know, during my time there, I reported into Kathy Edwards, who, you know, very entrepreneurial, sort of executive. They sold their business to Apple, and then they sold their second business to Google, and incredible product thinker, you know, and one of the most successful executives I've seen of getting stuff done in a large organization. And I learned a ton from Kathy. And then later on, I was reporting into Liz Reed, and Liz was like very early Google, and quite literally, you know, one of the smartest people I've ever met, and had, you know, the ability to retain and recall information, you know, in a Google search-esque way, and was like, you know, able to lean on, you know, 15, 20 years of experience building Google. And, you know, just being able to be around those people and learn from those people was what was really surreal for me. You know, having grown up on a sheep farm in Northeast England, to suddenly being sat in a room with some of the smartest people. And I think for me, that's what has always been so important for my career. You know, like News Corp, I was lucky to be in that situation. I, you know, told the story about Rupert and walking through newspapers, to Snap with Evan, and, pretty well documented that, Evan's one of the leading product thinkers in the world, to Google, where you just have people who are, exceptional operators and, exceptional executives. So I felt like in my career, that's what's been so important for me. Just surround myself with brilliant people that I can learn from. I mentioned those 4 people, all incredibly different. And then obviously, like now at Fanatics with Michael Rubin, very, very different again. But, I think it's like, to me, that's what I get out of bed for every day, which is like, how do I work with the smartest people and leaders? So,
well, I mean, what's so cool about that story is like, I look at News Corp and Google. I mean, you are working at some of the most beloved and just biggest brands on the planet. And there's a lot of trust that goes into those brands, and changing those products or changing kind of how people consume the media or the experiences is, as you said, just such an honor and such a big job. But like on the News Corp side, you were leading the digital transformation, and that led to Snap and how publishers think about that experience. And I mean, you kind of created a whole new consumption model for media, like, short bite-sized clips that tell a whole story and a whole lot of content. And as you're talking about Google, is it people are just going to be searching for these products, or are they actually going to be engaging with people who are talking about the products, and you're seeing them in action, and it's more of a TikTok-esque experience? And now that's what you're leading up at Fanatics Live. And so like, it's amazing that like you've seen those transformations from News Corp and then to Snap and now Google to what you're doing at Fanatics. And so like, talk to us a little bit about what is happening at Fanatics, and like, what was that kind of aha moment where you're like, this is the future for this?
Yeah. So again, I think one of the through lines here for me is working with organizations that have traction, right? That have brand presence, that obviously have strong leadership, but also, at a moment in time when they're going through some form of a transformation. And I think if you look at Fanatics, there's kind of multiple points of transformation that the business is going through. For you don't know the story of Fanatics, it's a decade plus old. Started off, Michael Rubin sold a business, GSI Commerce, to eBay, and didn't go to eBay, but took some of the assets that didn't sell to eBay and carried on with them. One of them being Fanatics. And, Fanatics' core principle initially was, selling sports merchandise. And I think Michael's, instinct and insight and kind of light bulb moment here was that it's going to be very hard to compete against brands like Amazon unless you have an advantage. And so, Michael went and secured the rights across some of the major sports leagues to sell the official merchandise. And I think, a decade plus in, Fanatics is like going through, really entering its next major chapter, which it's going from being a single threaded business, if you like, with selling merchandise, to a multi-threaded business where you have betting and gaming, and you have the collectibles business. And I think what's interesting right now is, and I kind of like, if you think about Fanatics, I liken it to the 1950s Walt Disney kind of strategy map. I don't know whether you've seen that before, but which is,
I love that thing.
I love it. It's and honestly, this is something that I in terms of strategy, I've always thought was like the crispest and cleanest way to articulate a strategy. And I've been a fan of this for the last decade. And, when I was talking to Michael, it really struck me that this is what Fanatics is trying to do, which is, rather than own the IP like Disney, we rent the IP from the leagues and the teams, but really, it's how do you create an ecosystem where you can seamlessly pass the fan from one product to the next, depending where they're up to or what's going on in, their day or their life cycle. And if you look at Fanatics today, over 100 million fans as part of our ecosystem. And they don't just want to buy jerseys, but, they might want to place a bet. They might want to engage with content. They might want to buy tickets. They might want to, get involved with collectibles. And it's just like, how do you start to help fans traverse the ecosystem of products and services that help them be the ultimate fan and show their fandom? And I think, that's what felt like such a big opportunity. And, being a part of the team that's, trying to define that for the next period of time. And, we obviously have, a big strategic advantage with the fact that, over the last decade, Fanatics has built, strong relationships with a large number of people and built up strong relationships with the most important athletes and brands in sport. And now it's feels like a really good platform to go on to the next stage and try to tie all of that together.
And do you see Fanatics Live as will there be kind of this UI collapse into the app over time, do you think, for the Fanatics properties? And is that the vision, kind of like a super app of sports?
Yeah, I think, listen, I think I would say that is TBD. I think that's definitely, part of our thinking here. I think if you look at where we are in the business right now, we're highly, aligned to the collectibles part of the business. So we acquired Topps less than 2 years ago. And I think what's interesting about the sports card market and, the cards sort of market in general is it's a huge industry, right? I saw a number a couple of days ago, it's $44 billion a year industry. But there's really been very, very little innovation. I mean, if you go back to the early cards with gum to the cards that you get today, I mean, the quality, the foil, the kind of print aspects are definitely better, but it's not really radical. And I think the way the product is marketed has been an area where there's been a lack of innovation, and frankly, just bringing the community together, there's been a lack of innovation. So I think that's where we see as the big opportunities. And I think if you look at what the collectibles team have achieved over the last couple of years, we've already made some pretty significant strides there. Everything from, last year we launched the debut patch for MLB, where, the first time a rookie walks onto the field, they actually wear a physical patch on their sleeve. It's a true 1 of 1 that then gets encased in a card, and you can own that moment in history, right? I think if you look at the marketing that we've done around cards recently, there was a recent campaign we did with Tom Brady where, the whole campaign is based on the fact that he could have played for the Expos, and the whole campaign is as if he had played for the Expos. And it's don't worry if, baseball doesn't work out, there's always football, right? So just really leaning into, some of those sports stories and some of the athletes and, thinking about how we market and innovate in this space. And I think the biggest area for disruption is how do you tap into this huge community of sports fans and collectors and create, a space, a digital space, if you like, where they can, share their collection, where they can chat with one another, where they can buy, sell, trade. And Fanatics Live obviously being part of that. And we think that, live commerce is the perfect opportunity to bring all of that together. Obviously we've gone into other areas as well. We acquired a business called PWCC Marketplace last May, which is a sports trading card platform. And now we're just thinking about how we stitch all of that together into a kind of cohesive experience that allows collectors to, be lifelong collectors and super serve those who are already collectors, but also bring new people into the hobby and just make it more fun and enjoyable. So.
And I mean, you guys have such a strong relationship with all the leagues already from the Fanatics original business that you've talked about for past 10 years. So what's the involvement from the leagues in kind of marketing these kind of new innovations on the cards side, but then also on the live experience? Are they involved, or are you guys just driving that?
Yeah. So we have great relationships with the leagues, obviously with our collectibles business today. The major league that we're involved with is MLB with baseball. We have football and basketball coming online over the next couple of years as well. So I'd say, those relationships are still kind of a little way out. But I mean, to look at MLB for a second, again, the debut patches on the sleeves, there's no one else in the world who could do that. We have the rights, but we also have the relationships to make that happen. If you look at, again, for anyone who's listening, who's like a collector, one of the biggest pain points but collectors is redemptions, which is basically, you know, you get an IOU in the pack of cards that you open that says you're owed a card, usually with an autograph on it, right? And the reason those autograph cards aren't in the packs is because the athletes didn't sign them on time to get them into the production. Well, obviously at Fanatics, you know, we have the ability we have much stronger relationships with athletes. You know, we're able to focus on, you know, leaning into the athletes and creating fun experiences for them to come together and actually get them to sign the cards on time. And that in you know, that seems like a small thing, but it actually manifests itself by just really improving the experience. So you're not getting these IOUs that you then have to go and redeem. So there's just like a lot of little things that we think we can do to make the experience better. And then, you know, longer term, the way we look at it is, you know, every collector is a sports fan, but not every sports fan is a collector. So how do we start to, you know, partner more closely across all of the leagues and kind of franchises that exist out there to bring this to life and get it in front of more people? Because, you know, I think it's a great expression of fandom.
And this is a super random question, but just given how valuable these cards are now, like what is like the Topps production facility like? It's like Fort Knox for like the collectibles world. Is it kind of surreal?
It is wild. I mean, like I would say I'd liken it to a plant that produces currency. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like the Jerome Powell of like the card currency. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool facility.
Yeah. I have a few nephews that are just engrossed in cards and have started to create their own business. I mean, this is how they are learning about economics, basically. They're like, oh, I pulled this one of 10. Yeah.
Honestly, this is it, right? I was at the Super Bowl this past weekend, and we took some of our largest collectors there, and just chatting to those folks, and like most of them grew up and learned about cards through, you know, their relationship with their parents, and now that's passing on to their parents. And it's like, you know, how do you trade? How do you actually think about this, and how do you learn about business via sports cards? And I think that's very true. And you know, the folks that we were there with this weekend, for a lot of them, this is like actually their business, right? You know, they're buying, selling, and trading, and, you know, acquiring and holding these cards. And, you know, I think that's obviously a huge part of the market for us. But I think more broadly than that, there's just something, you know, really great about, you know, being able to express your fandom by, you know, having a product and collecting a product. And that's how I grew up, actually. You know, in the UK, trading cards weren't a thing. We had soccer stickers, and first thing you would do is buy the album, and then you would spend the next 3 or 4 months in the yard trading with your friends to try and complete the set. And it really was just about fandom. It was like, you love this sport, and it gives you purpose, and it gives you, you know, and it created that community in the schoolyard where, you know, whether it was kids in the year above, kids in the year below, it didn't matter. If you were chasing a particular sticker, you were happy to have those conversations. And like the way it built those relationships and community was awesome. And I think, you know, that's something that we can bring some of that into the digital world. I think it's a really interesting way to start conversation. In the same way as if you sit down on a plane and someone's wearing, you know, a shirt from your rival, or, you know, a jersey from your team, you're like, it sparks conversation. I think sport is one of those things that like bridges all of those social awkwardnesses. So it's pretty cool.
That's very cool. I guess, you know, and I know you have like a ton going on. So before we wrap up, just kind of curious, and you may be just too busy to even do this right now, but like outside of like Fanatics, like where else are you just like really excited and sort of like inspired by, just given your track record of spotting things, you know, what's other stuff you're thinking about?
You know, I think, you know, obviously one of the things that I was heavily involved with during my investment period was like the attention economy. And I think like, if you look at my business trajectory over the last few years, everything's been involved with the attention economy. And like the fact that I think, you know, the number one resource that we have in the world is attention, right? You know, time is like, frankly, the only truly scarce resource that we all encounter every single day, right? And And I think how do you capture, how do you measure, how do you actually gain people's attention is key. And like we've kind of fall into this world of like vanity metrics of impressions, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the reality is like there's a huge difference between, millions of impressions and true attention. And it's the stories that we engage with on a daily basis are the stories that really influence the decisions that we make in our lives, right? It's like, whether it's an ad or whether it's sat there talking to your friend, it's those stories that help us make every single decision. So I think for me, that's always been kind of a sweet spot. I think, I'd be remiss not to say that AI has been like an area that's really intrigued me recently, because I think that actually starts to erode a lot of the principles that we've built attention on over the past, thousands of years, like, Gen AI, like, can you create storytelling which is so perfectly crafted for that individual that it's going to capture their attention? Like super interesting, right? Can you start to help people summarize and learn about topics in a very natural way, which is right for not only their interest, but the stage of their interest they're at? If you're like just starting to learn about a topic, then obviously, the way education's worked is over the years as you start simple and you build and build and build and build and build. I don't think tools like Google have ever really figured that out, right? If I search for quantum physics, how do you know whether I'm a quantum physics expert, or as in my case, know nothing about it? And how do you start to ladder that up? But I think, the ability for AI to start to help to guide and help you build and learn is super interesting. So I think, and do it in a way which is truly immersive as well, right? Some people are visual learners. Some people, prefer to learn by listening. It's like, how do you start to customize content in those ways? And that's not really been something that's been, possible until now. So I think that space of future storytelling is really interesting. I think on the counter to that, there's something really interesting to me still about, high quality, live and high quality, media, which just, I think will always win. Right. And I was, bringing some of that together. I recently joined the board of NCIM, which is, the company that, does a large portion of the pre-movie advertising in the US. And just if you look at the engagement figures on pre-movie advertising, it's huge because people are sat there, they're in a dark room, they're not allowed to use their phone, and they're in the mode of consumption. And so the recall on ads from, before a movie is huge, right? And people are going to the movies because they want to watch, absolute top quality programming or top quality media. And I think for me, that world of live and that world of top quality doesn't go away. I think it just becomes better. And I think what's going to be interesting are who are the companies that manage to figure out how to actually, lean into that probably shrinking market, but a market that becomes more and more important. And I think we're seeing that with sports rights. We're seeing that with, the huge investment in original programming that's going on across Apple, Netflix, et cetera. But where that goes, I don't know. I think it's just an interesting space to watch.
That's fascinating. It's so cool. I think that the idea of like, just like the more human things and the more like real kind of experiences, I think gaining more and more just like, I think appreciation over time is really fascinating. And from an ads perspective, I agree. It's also really interesting just because like, when do you have someone's attention? Yeah, man, it's crazy. Yeah. It's very cool. And, speaking of time, I just like, I know you have a ton going on. So thank you for taking the time to do this. We really do appreciate it. And if anyone has not downloaded Fanatics Live yet, they should. It's awesome. But thank you, man, for doing this.
Thanks.
It means a lot. And it's very cool.
I appreciate it. It's great to see you. A huge fan. And appreciate it. And look forward to chatting again soon.